This podcast is presented by the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association and the Florida Department of Agriculture.
I'm Tammy Gantt, and I'm joined today by our guest, Dr. Krista Seltzer, the manager and owner of Solera Farm here in Ocala, Florida. So I know we were talking a little bit earlier about your farm. So tell me a little bit how you came about Solera Farm, and then also how you came about purchasing Field Commission, because he's the first stallion of yours that I remember at the farm.
Right. So we've had the farm since 2006, and really we didn't even intend to have a farm that had a training track or anything like that. I've always wanted to bring our weanlings that we've had in Kentucky. My dad's always believed that Florida raises a fantastic horse. So we always like to have the babies, once they're born in Kentucky, they stay there till they're weaned and be here. So that's what we really want to do, have a farm that we could raise our weanlings.
In the nice sunshine.
Exactly.
Nice
and they
weather.
get, they don't have any restricted time because the weather's always good, lots of vitamin D, good nutrition. I mean, the grass, it's like even growth. I mean, it really is. And Florida outruns their pedigrees all the time. I mean, they truly do, it seems like. So the farm actually had a training track on it. We were thinking, well, it's a great farm, but oh my gosh, what do we do with the training track? Because we don't know. And as luck would have it, Curtis, who was on the farm for several years at that time, we said, well, would you be willing to stay on with us? And he said yes, and thank goodness he did. So now it's great. So we have that. So Field Commission was actually one of the, when we bought the farm from the Mitchells, one of the yearlings that was.
So it was like about a dozen horses you
yes,
had
about
there.
a dozen of those. I mean, that were there. So he was one of those horses, and we raced him in Canada, and he obviously was successful, and he was a wonderful horse to be around. And
He was Horse of the Year in Canada,
yeah,
correct?
he was the champion sprinter.
Yeah,
He was
champion sprinter. And he could go long and short from what I remember.
He didn't go too
No?
long. He really
Okay.
mostly sprinted, but he did all surfaces. So
All
he
surfaces,
ran
that's
on
what it
the
was,
synthetic and turf in Canada. Then we had given him, when he was he would always, because he was Ontario bred, we would race him at Woodbine, and Danny Bella was training for us at the time. And so we would give him the winter off, and he would always go back and race there in the spring. Well, in his older, it was his 5 to 6 year old year, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when he was coming back training, he was doing great, but we thought, well, he's just not moving as well as he normally did, I think. And so we just said, you know what, let's just give him the year off, because we don't have to push him or anything like that. He wasn't lame, but he just, had a lot of miles on him. So when we were bringing him back for the next year, we said, we really want to try to run him on dirt. And at the time, there wasn't dirt at Woodbine.
Yeah.
So we got him back after a long layoff, I think it was 18 months, and decided to try him on dirt at Calder. So Curtis ran him off the track, off the farm, and he was pretty incredible.
I remember that race. I was there that day, and he was a flashy colored horse anyway, beautiful horse, really has a presence about him.
Yeah.
And so it was
a very kind horse.
Yeah, he
and
seems
smart.
very kind.
He was
Kind
very
guy.
kind.
I didn't realize that he was that kind, but I always noticed at the Stallion shows he was just such a good
Yeah.
boy. So talk a little bit about what made you stand him here, I guess, because you had the farm and you didn't have an intention to have a stallion station, did you?
No, never. In fact, no, we didn't ever intend. That wasn't the plan. But when he got hurt in the smile, and first we just wanted to make sure that he was okay. But the fact that he could do dirt, and what was really interesting that I forgot to tell you about that before we ran on the stake of Calder, where he it did a new stake record, was I had said, because we didn't think, because he was by service stripe, it wouldn't be as appealing to people, potentially standing a sub. Plus, he had mostly just run on the grass and synthetic. So in this country, you kind of have to, you don't always have to have dirt, but it's more helpful. And so I had said to my dad, I love this horse. He's gorgeous. He has heart. He has so much talent, speed. He's got a decent pedigree. What about if we just bred him to some of our own mares? So we actually did do that to a handful of our own mares, never intending to stand him at stud. And then, because I said to Curtis, and then someone heard we were breeding him, they're like, can I send a mare? And he was like 2 weeks away from shipping down to run. And Curtis said, no, I don't want to do it that soon before the race. So he was an incredible mind. He was breeding mares went an 18-month layoff when did the race. So we just thought, but then he hurt himself. So I was hoping he'd be okay to stand if we were going to, and he was. And then we thought, well,
And
why
he
not?
he
Because
so
he did so well at the dirt, and he could do all the surfaces, and he was just he had a great mind. He was a good
great
horse.
offering to the Florida breeders. I remember the Stallion show going out there
Yeah.
and a lot of the breeders looking at him and saying this is plus just his fame
Yeah.
from being on 3 surfaces. So now flash forward, you've got a couple stallions at the farm.
Yeah.
Now you want to talk a little bit about the stallions you got at the farm, a little bit about their
Right.
bloodlines or what you believe they offer the Florida breeders specifically, or not just Florida breeders. I mean, people from out of state obviously can come and breed to them
Sure.
too.
Well, the two of them, I mean, Greatness, who is older, obviously he's 24 this year,
And he was a homebred, right?
he was a homebred, and Adina stood him. But then I think when they left Florida, he kind of went on, I don't know, into different adventures. He was in Pennsylvania, and then I think he was down here a little bit, and he came to us much later, basically for retirement, and we were happy to retire him if he needed that. But he loves his job, so
that's
we
great.
certainly don't push it. And he's the last Mr. Prospector, obviously.
So that's a
to be
good key
standing.
right there.
Yeah.
That I think he's the only son of Mr. Prospector standing in the state currently.
Yeah, I don't think, in the state and maybe even in the country, because I don't think there's any, I think there was one in Canada, and I could be wrong about that, but I think he is one of the
limited access to that.
So,
that
and he has a
generation.
great female side of his pedigree, Harbor Club, which we ran, we bred her. I mean, so Greatness is, I think, third gen. I mean, we've had multiple, the female family generations.
Yeah.
And so he has a great page, a lot of speed, very classic Mr. Prospector, and a lot of durability. I mean, he's still going, at 24 and happy to do his job. And then Roguish is also same female family, Into Mischief horse that out of a Rahi mare, really handsome and very typical of the family, precocious in speed, but they can carry their distance a little bit.
Yeah, and Rahi's, I remember meeting Rahi at pasture many years ago. Just a nice horse too.
Yeah.
Again, I think I see there's a trend with you that you're very honest with your horses.
Yeah.
That you make sure you have a good horse and they have durability. As far as they're good stayers. They like to go, and they also are ones that you have a connection with that you've kept for many, many years, which is really amazing.
Yeah, when you raise them from the babies, you kind of get attached to them. Not that you don't sell some because you have to make a living, and hopefully we put some good ones out there. So
Yeah, so you do a little bit of breeding to race and breeding to sell. And then, like you were saying, you put house mares under the horses first.
Right.
And then, and you have, how large is your brood mare band here and how large is it in Kentucky?
Well, we just sold some brood mares in this past sale because we're going to actually for Roguish, because I mean his foals really sold well. I mean, and they're very handsome, and they're really really nice. And I'm not saying that just because it's Roguish, but they were really nice. So because we want to move a bunch of our mares that we have in Kentucky that we typically breed, to that level of stallion, down here to breed to him.
Great.
We'll probably bring about 10 to 12 mares that we have up there that normally would stay to Kentucky Stallions that we're going to use to breed to him.
Well, as the Florida breeders, we're glad
Yes.
to hear that. Really glad to
So,
hear that. But,
yeah.
but for us, as Florida Breeders Owners Association and the Florida industry, your investment in the property that you have, and the investment in the horses and bloodstock you keep here, and you are a veterinarian in our community, so you know how robust it is here and how great it is to have horses here, especially this, in the springtime for this wonderful weather for foaling and the breeding season.
It's great for that because, we have to have foals. Well, everyone wants to have a January foal, right? But here you can have one and it's nice and they can be outside and they don't have to be locked up in the cold and the ice. It's a lot more natural. And I think it's the vitamin D and the even nutrition plants. Sometimes, and Kentucky's great, don't get me wrong, but they get this lush spring, and then sometimes the horses shoot up. And I mean, it's great both places, but I love that the horses can get out.
It's interesting
in
you
the
bring
grass.
up the growing season, because you're correct. There were times in the Midwest where we would have to pull our horses off
Right.
the grass because it was just a little too lush. But here, like you said, the even
Right.
growing, you got the spring fed aquifers, and both are great horse country for sure. But there is a little bit of that wintertime advantage. And so you talked a little bit, and it was interesting because you said that when you were a very young age, when you were 2, you were interested in having your own horse or
Right.
pony.
Right.
And then you mentioned a little bit to me once about how your dad was in Chicago and how he kind of got the family involved and got involved with horses. So you want to talk a little bit about his passion for the thoroughbred?
Yes, he did. I mean, he wasn't raised around horses, and actually,
And your dad's name? So
my
everyone
dad,
knows.
Edward Seltzer.
Yes,
yeah.
Edward Seltzer, for
And
those that-
he's been doing it a long time. I hope I can never be as smart as him in the business, and it's a passion for him for the breeding. But the way he got started in it, I think he was, oh God, I want to say in his late 20s maybe, and he was at a card game playing with a bunch of guys, and one of the guys said, "Oh, I just ended up with this racehorse. I think it was some cheap claiming horse." He said, "Does anyone want to go in with me?" My dad said, "Sure." And I think, his part might have been $500. Somebody said I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have any money at the time, and so he said that they had a lot of fun. It wasn't a very successful racehorse, but he fell in love with the game, and then that was it. So then he just started doing it.
Starting to purchase horses here and
then
there.
he was really, and he really got started more in, and you should talk to him more about it because he's better at telling the stories than I am, obviously, because I wasn't alive at that time. But he got started claiming, and then he really realized that he was very successful in claiming horses, that he started looking and saying, these horses are bred for the grass. And so he would sometimes claim, and then they would put them on the grass.
So they were running them on dirt, but he saw they
Yes.
were well suited for turf.
Right.
So he made a
Right.
smart claiming play,
Right.
moved them over to that, and had success.
Yeah, and I think because at first people were saying, "Oh, it's a turf foot," or "It's not a turf foot," and he's like, "I think the pedigree says sometimes it's turf." So yeah, and we have a lot of turf horses ourselves. We just have kind of a love of turf too. So
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think there are some folks that have that affinity to seeing their horses run on the grass. And so, his interesting, it almost began to sound like the beginning of a movie.
Yeah.
Dad was playing card in a
But it's
card
true,
game in
yeah.
Chicago, and I got a horse,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
sometimes that's how it starts. Sometimes, like you said that you, from a young age, just knew you wanted to be around horses,
Right.
and then went into the veterinary field. You want to tell a little bit about, I think it's kind of funny how you were kind of fixing up some animals when you were young, little stuffed animals.
when I was around 8, I said to myself, all right, a little before that actually, I just want to be a veterinarian. I just want to be a veterinarian. And so I would ask my brother and my sister, "Can you just look and see if any of your stuffed animals have a hole in them or something?" And I had my little vet office. And it was in a closet I made, just in a little closet, and I would have them and I'd sew them up. And
It's such a cute story
yeah.
because you think about it, you could have ended up being a seamstress.
yes, you're right. But I
Instead
don't
of a
think,
veterinarian.
yeah.
And you're
I do better
actually-
sewing up animals than
And you're an
clothes,
actually
but-
authorized surgeon, so some of
Yes,
those
board
skills
certified
from
surgeon.
back then, apply
Yeah.
today. And so you tell a little bit about your role at the farm, because I think a lot of horse people know that we carry a lot of hats.
Right.
But in addition to being a working veterinarian, you also do a lot of management of the farm.
Yeah. So Curtis, our farm manager, he does mostly the training barn and the training and the breaking training, and he really kind of oversees everything in general. If something's going awry, we're like, "Call Curtis, get Curtis here." But I do mostly managing the brood mares and the foals and the yearling barn, and we all do it together. Really, but we have too many horses for Curtis to be everywhere. So mostly the training is his, and I'm definitely no trainer. I don't know what that's all about, other than I can watch a horse go on the track and say, "Yeah, it looks good," or "It doesn't look good." But training's not my thing. But the mares and the foals and the weanlings or / yearlings, and then we prep them for the sale and for the ones that are going. And we don't really breed commercially, to be honest with you. We don't breed for sale. We breed to breed a racehorse, but you have to sell some in order just not to have so many
Just
and
part of
plus
the
to pay the
portfolio,
bills.
if
Right.
you will.
So
And then you
we're really
manage the
trying to-
farm there and here. And what would you say is now that you look back on your career and love of being a veterinarian and all the horses, what do you think is the thing that you're most passionate about? Is it being around the brood mares and foals?
My I love, to be honest with you, the whole idea of breeding and raising a good horse. And that means to me that you breed and raise a good horse of sound body, mind, and from every step of the way. So that they're healthy from like when the foals are born to make them, grow healthy, be horses, and give them all the foundation that they need so that when they're weaned, it's an easy transition. And then from the weanling, when we hand them over to the weanling barn, I want those babies to be like, this is easy and I'm good. And then the same thing when they go on to the training barn, that it's not a big shock to them. It's easy. We don't overhandle. They're still growing up and being horses. And also to breed a good sound racehorse. And which means, and we really try to do that conformationally, mentally, and also ability-wise. And sometimes it takes a little longer to know what your mare needs or doesn't need. And same thing when we decide to stand something. And we never intended to be a stallion farm, ever. Yeah. But Field Commission, to me, which started it, we thought, this is crazy, but we never thought about doing it. He had all the goods. He had a decent enough pedigree. He had a great mind. He had great ability. And he was a nice, beautiful, sound horse. And it's the same with the ones that we have. I mean, obviously, they're homebreds, but we believe in them.
Yeah, well, I think it's just an amazing story for someone that says one day they want to get involved in the business. And then also, if someone wants to breed to a stallion, there's greatness and roguish at your farm. Thank you for coming in. And thank you so much for highlighting Solera Farm. Again, this is Dr. Krista Seltzer and her father, Ed. If you ever get a chance to run into him, I'm sure he'll share a lot more stories than we could today.
And he is brilliant. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.